Why are gig apps on the wrong path and following the wrong paths of companies, the giants, the big gig apps, even the smaller ones now? Illegal metrics to weed out unwanted drivers on the platform, while at the same time conning new drivers to the platform, new drivers, into believing that those metrics matter and deceiving them into thinking they need to take all these offers that they don't. Well, we are used to the giant gig apps doing this. And as I just mentioned, why are the smaller companies following this now? The smaller companies were supposed to be the ones that were coming to help fight that playbook and to stop this from happening, to stop these apps from using these metrics. There's a lot of gig apps out there that don't have the metrics. There's some still operating correctly under independent contractor law, but there's many that are starting to use tiers and things like this. And this is what we didn't want. With legislation circling independent contractor law in many states right now, and when I say many, we're talking a lot. And I understand every state has been trying to work with these apps for a long time to find a solution. However, even when often they can't, and they just come to the table to meet, and then they walk away. Often they do find a solution, and the gig apps don't live up to their portion. Welcome to 13. Exercising control over drivers breaks independent contractor law in every single state in the country. There's not one that it doesn't. That is the first thing of independent contractor law in every state, is that the hiring entity for the gig or /job/work does not have any control over the person they are hiring to do the work. For those of us in the gig economy, that would mean mapping, telling us how to do it, using a metric. How did we do it? How did the customer rank us? To be honest, I'm gonna put something in place here right now. Even though it still would be illegal, if the hiring entity, as they always claim, we're independent contractors, and they are simply passing along offers to us from customers, those customers are our customers. We, the independent contractor, are now getting clients from apps. That's why they're nothing more than a switch operating company dispatching jobs. But here's the thing, you can't have the metrics regardless, or else you can't use the term independent contractor. Many lawmakers are now choosing this as a path to make these companies either follow independent contractor law or the dreaded classify everybody on the platform as an employee, and the gig platforms are going to have to figure it out. For those of you curious that forgot or were never aware, remember Doordash and other companies are testing W-2 models in certain cities. There's more now, but I can even say that Fresno and Austin are still testing. They're testing you be a full-time W-2 employee for the gig apps, but you have to delete the app in those towns if you want to try this. And therefore you can never reapply to the app, but you'll be working for a company that hires out and treats you like a W-2. And the pay is ridiculously low. Some of you hustling who don't see many offers anymore and are saying, gosh, my pay is way down, you still make more than the employees do. In 2020, California pulled the ABC test out of state labor law regarding independent contractors. Now, ABC law, the ABC test to determine whether somebody is an independent contractor or an employee, is something that has been in there for decades in the California labor law. In fact, it's in almost all of our states' labor law, but it's from the 50s or 60s. We're talking 50 plus years ago, this was in labor law. Then we had the IRS test. Then we had the Barella test through the IRS, both which were good metrics, at least 100 times better than the ABC test because it's almost unpassable. Remember that sometimes in labor law, there's going to be things from the past that don't apply to today. The technology's moved so far ahead, but now they're pulling this old law out of the law that they're like, let's try this. So California's ABC test removed the IRS Barella test to determine a worker's status. This initially was aimed at gig app platform workers, but instead caught all self-employed freelancers, independent contractors of all kinds, traditional independent contractors who had found niches or ways to start their own business, the American dream. Well, California passed AB 5 and they decided, let's not just go for the gig economy, let's go for everybody. So they cast the net far and applied the ABC test to everybody. Most people in California still are out of business or have just folded. After 40 years in an industry, finding a niche, all this, they can no longer be independent contractors. The gig apps, which they were initially going after, have decided to form the Flex Association. And for once, all of the big giant gig apps came together and raised $208 million. $208 million got them a ballot proposal because AB 5 went into effect January 1st of 2020. It got them a ballot proposal to be on the November 2020 ballot, or to vote in California, and whether or not gig workers could have a carve out from the law, Proposition 22. 60% of Californians voted for that. Now, California is a pretty heavily far left Democratic state, but they voted in favor of all these gig app corporations because they didn't want to lose the ability to use rideshare or delivery or whatever it might be. That was the more important value to them. And it should be. You should have never taken away the chance to do that. So fast forward to today. States having been battling how to get these gig apps to follow their state laws, meaning independent contractor law. Every state has independent contractor law in your labor law. You can go look it up. I've told you this for years. They're pretty much all the same. You know, it's just a basic definition of what the American dream is what it is. You're allowed to start a business as long as it's legal, as long as you're paying your taxes. You are allowed in every state to start a business, to start your own company, to be an entrepreneur, to invest in companies, to do all these things. And we're all familiar with this. So after years of trying to negotiate with these companies with no progress in almost all the states that they're sitting at the table with them, many states are now looking into their own labor laws. And that's what Washington State, that's what New York, that's what New Jersey and some of these other states are finding, is that in almost every state, the same labor law that we talk about regarding the independent contractor status has an ABC test. You have to go way far back into it to find it because nobody's used it in 40, 50 plus years. However, in almost every state it's in there because at a time it was thought to be the best way. Let's quickly address the 3 prongs of the ABC test because these are very important, because this will, and I want you to decide if you pass this test. Maybe you do. Maybe you do. But as we've seen, almost everybody who's challenged it in any state can't. Again, leave your comments below. I love the comments. I reply to all of them. So you guys leave your comments below. And especially after you hear this, leave the state, city, or market that you do gig work in. And I will tell you if your state is trying to push this law, because many are. The rollout is different for each state. But I mean, like in my state, ABC law is coming up in 2026. They're trying to modify it a bit, and most states probably will. But let's roll through it, shall we? So the ABC test, the number 1, so that's 3 prongs. 1, you must be free of control from the hiring entity. So if it's DoorDash, if it's Uber Eats, if it's Uber, whatever it is, Instacart, it doesn't even matter. Whatever it is, you must be free of any direction from the company, meaning mapping, this, that. They cannot tell you how to do your jobs, including third-party apps that would help you do your job better and quicker. They can't say you can't use those, and they do. So you're not allowed to use those, but they can't do that. So are you free from control? You cannot be doing the same business as the hiring entity's business. So let me give you a for instance. I was going to use Uber, but let's always stick with Lyft, because Lyft only does rideshare. But this applies to everybody, and it applies to all the platforms. I mean, it applies to Uber and DoorDash and everything too. But let's say this: or let's take DoorDash. I've been using Lyft. Let's try DoorDash. If you work for DoorDash, DoorDash's main business is what? Delivering food, right? So to be an independent contractor for DoorDash, the one thing you can't do is deliver food, because that is their main business. The way that this has always been looked at by every state and in these labor laws is that would be skirt tailing the W-2 model, because it's the company trying to get out of, say, like if I run a delivery company and I want an independent contractor all my delivery drivers out, I can't do that because my company does delivery. I could independent contractor a plumber to come fix the plumbing at the business, because that is not what the company does. But I can't independent contractor. So the B prong is the tough one. You can't do the work that the platform is primarily asking you to do. That's illegal. And 3, you must be engaged in the business that you are doing. Like if you're doing delivery for DoorDash, you must independently be doing delivery on your own and be able to prove that outside of the gig apps. That's the 3rd prong. So that you have a delivery company, but occasionally you take some DoorDash. I think that doesn't apply to almost all of you. So now, do you see the problem? Please leave all your comments below, what market you work in, and I will respond. I'll tell you where your state's at. I'll tell you, I mean, people think the red states are out and whatnot. No state's out. All states are all in fact. They're trying to find any way to get these people to the table, and they've had a lot of trouble. So this is the new way. Look out, guys, because it's coming. And that's 13 and 13. Peace, y'all.